Okay, so a few months ago I did a channel update where I talked about the Colt series and the upcoming Trapdoor Springfield series. And at the time I basically had this book and this book. But I asked if anybody out there had any suggestions on books for me to get into the Trapdoor series, especially the earlier Trapdoors pre-73. And as you can see, I've got quite a few suggestions, and we've actually filled out quite a few. Now, this is the current reading list that I have, and don't worry, more is coming. There's actually 3 more books that I'll talk about in the end of this video, and we'll have a few other little channel updates as we go on here. So, first of all, channel update. We are back from harvest, and actually still cutting a little bit of wheat here and there, just kind of the tail end stuff, but we will be getting back to our full schedule. Ethan is right now currently, even though it's July, we are beginning work on the Guns of the Pilgrim episode for this year, and that should be out in November, and it will actually be on wheel locks this year. And Ethan is currently building a rifle shop wheel lock, completely built out of castings. But right now we are focusing 100% on the Trapdoor series, and we actually do own every Trapdoor except for a few of the very, very rare variations. And a few of those we even have, like the officer's model, we have replicas of, but the rest of them are all original. We have everything. Let's see, we have the 65, we have 2 66s, a Bannerman cut down and a really nice full length. We have the 68s, we have the 70, it needs some work done on it, and I'm still working on it. We have the 73, we have the 75 officers model, we have the 69 cadet model, we have the 73 carbine, we have the 1881 forager. That one was a hard find. And we also have the model 1884 and the 1888 ramrod bayonet rifle, and are currently looking at building a 30 caliber test gun, because obviously we're never going to own one of the 4 that existed. So we're going to attempt to make one, maybe out of an old cut up Bannerman gun if we can find it, one that obviously doesn't work or has seen better days, and we are attempting to make one in 30-40 Krag, so we'll have a full series. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about these books. So this is the reading list we have right now on the Trapdoor rifles. Now, the thing about the Trapdoor rifles is, to understand them, you seriously have to go back to the Civil War, and you have to understand the 3 basic Springfield rifles. Well, actually 4 Springfield rifles that were basically used during the Civil War. Technically even 5. You have the 1855 with the tape Maynard system. You have the 1861 regular Springfield, which is basically just an 1855 with the Maynard system removed. You have the Colt contract variant, which is where this book comes in right here, which is basically what would become the 1863. Then you have the 1863 Springfield itself, and then you have the 1864, which some people call the 1863 Type 2, but historically everything I can find says that Springfield actually called it the model of 1864. And those are basically all the guns you have to know about, and you have to understand their history before you can even start studying trapdoors. And there's other things you need to understand. You need to understand what was going on in the country at the time, so you need a few general history books that I haven't got laid out here because I don't have time. Well, I got carbine and lance, but like I said, you got to understand what's going on with the military, how tight finances were. Need a full picture of everything surrounding the Trapdoor series before you can even start. So let's start down here. This is an old one. I've actually had this one since I was a kid, but I still use it. It's just a good reference book, Civil War Collector's Encyclopedia, and you're going to find things in there like what it will cost them to produce a Henry in 1864, something like that. A lot of things in there. Good reference book. Has a lot of little ing-and-ding guns, and of course it even has some it has some stuff on pistols, haversacks, knapsacks, anything you want. You're going to learn a lot about uniforms. It's just a basic book. It doesn't go very deep. It's by Francis A. Lord. It does not go very deep into anything, but it does give you a general overview of almost everything, at least firearms related, used in the Civil War. Rifled Musket by Claude E. Fuller is a good book. I haven't got real deep into this one yet, but basically it's going to discuss the design of the 1855 moving forward to the 1864 a lot of design stuff in there, a lot of factory letters, things like that. And over here we have Colt rifles and muskets. Now, the thing about the Colt contract rifle, which is a very important Civil War firearm, around 200,000 of them were made, and they were basically the #2 Northern arm. There's generally nothing written about them. Even in the book on Colt rifles and muskets, even though it has one right there second from the top, there's only about 4 or 5 pages in that entire book on it. And there's really just not a lot of information on the Colt rifles and muskets out there, but they're very important to the story. And then we have the rifled musket in Civil War Combat, Reality and Myth by Earl J. Hess. Very important, very important. And then we have down here Civil War arms makers and their contracts. So this is just, like I said, getting an understanding of everything around the invention of the trapdoor and what brought it about. How much money could they make if they'd surplus them? How did they decide to not use the contract rifles and only use the true Springfield locks and rifles when they made them? A lot of interesting stuff like that. Down here we have Civil War firearms, their historical background, tactical use, and modern collecting and shooting by Joseph G. Bibley. That's how you pronounce that. Just another, more of the same. And like I said, you got to have a good understanding, and except for the Colt musket, everything else has lots and lots of stuff written about it. And then over here we have the United States Model 1861 rifle musket by James Whisker and Kevin R. Spiker. And Kevin R. Spiker has written a lot of books. He always seems to show up in a lot of these books, at least as a reference or an author. Okay, so those are basically the Civil War books you need to understand the beginning of where the trapdoor rifles are based out of and why they are chosen over things like the Sharps, the Henry, or the Spencer. A lot of that is already written down in these. I suggest you have all of these if you're going to cover anything on trapdoor rifles. If you really want a true deep understanding, you need at least some of these books. I would say get all of them, but you know, that's just me. All right, over here we have a very interesting book. This is not on firearms. This is Small Arms Ammunition in the United States Service with 52 plates, basically by Lewis. And what this is it's basically covering, and I don't know if I can get it open here and show you all the paper cartridges and bullet types used in the United States military from 1775 forward. It also describes the Civil War paper cartridges, the ballistics used, the bullets used, the different sizes of bullets used, and how that all evolved into the 58 Allen rimfire, which evolved into the 50-70 centerfire. And they don't cover the 50-70 in that book, but they do end at the 58 rimfire. Very interesting book. All right, down here we have carbine and lance, and the reason I got this out here is because you need to have a good understanding of what was going on and the stories surrounding the trapdoor rifle. And this one starts way back before the trapdoor rifle. It's basically a story of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and it starts clear back almost the fur trade era and moves forward. But lots of stories about the Indian Wars, lots of stories about especially carbine and lance, a lot of stories about your trapdoor carbines, things like that fit in. Very good historical base to get to know what the soldiers felt about the firearms, you know, how they were used in combat, and to actually great success if you read this book. All right, Trapdoor Springfield. This one was the first one I had. This is by M.D. Bud Waite and B.D. Ernst. This book right here is really good as far as it's not real big, but it covers the 73 to 88 really well. Has a very few pages on the earlier guns in it, but it has a little bit of different information than some of the other books. You need perspective from everybody's point of view. This one has that perspective in spades, and it's very good if you're wanting to study, especially just the standard 1873 trapdoor model. Very good. All right, now over here. This is actually part of a 2-book set, and I only have book 2 out here because it is the one that is the most important starting out. And to be quite honest, I don't even have book number 1 yet. It's coming in the mail. But these are what people call the Bible of Springfield trapdoor rifles. And like I said, there's 2 of them. The first book they wrote in the 1980s, it was Al Frasca, and I can't remember who the other guy was, but mainly Frasca. He wrote 2 books. The first one, just like Springfield Trapdoor, was written in the 80s when nobody really cared about the early 50-70 models. And so the first book covers, just like Springfield Trapdoor, but in greater depth, the 1873 through the 1888 models. But years later, Frasco would come back realizing there was information lacking on the earlier models from 65 to 70. He would come back and write a completely different book. And book 2 is where you need to start because it covers 1865 and an in-depth covering of all of the guns from 65 to 70. And then there's more information in there on the 73 models to 88 that was not covered in the first book. So they really need to be a pair, but if you're going to get just one, because they are very expensive, I start with book 2 because it actually starts at the beginning of the story. This is Erskine S. Allen, director of the U.S. Armory in Springfield, Massachusetts, inventing and manufacturing the new weapons that won the Civil War by Kevin R. Spiker. This is the most expensive book I have ever purchased at $500, but I actually got a deal on it at $300 because it was a second misprint. There's not very many of these out there, and like I said, when you do find them, they are incredibly expensive. But it is the only book you're going to find dealing with Erskine S. Allen's life, and especially following the people around him down this journey of developing the Trapdoor rifle. The thing about this book is if you're buying it looking for it just to be like a biography of him, it's not. This is more of a story of everyday Springfield Armory from about 1829 to 1879 and a little bit beyond. But yes, obviously every chapter kind of begins with what's going on with Erskine S. Allen. I would say the majority of the book covers the people around him and what's happening at the armory during the times that he's alive, and tons and tons and tons of letters, lawsuits, anything else you could think of, contact between him and Root and Colt during the early development. Obviously Colt was dead, but when I say Colt, I mean Colt Firearms, but he was in contact with Root, Elijah K. Root, during the development of the first 1865 rifle, and you can actually see Root's fingerprints on that rifle. I mean, just if you look all over little design features that you know he would come up with. All that stuff's going to be in this book. Very, very good book. I sat down and read it cover to cover in it took me about 2 days, and it's just very expensive though, that's the thing. But it's very important if you want to have an understanding of what's going on in the maker's mind and the minds of the people that are working there, the things they felt earlier in the Civil War, before the Civil War, as the Civil War is getting going, hard times, fires. This development piece didn't work. This one did work. Just, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, until they finally get what they want in basically 1873 and then continue to improve on it through the years. But covers his life, not as much as the things going on in the armory, but the only place that I could really find a lot of the information that was needed. Alright, over here we have these little fort books, and they sell them in about every fort museum you visit, and I have quite a few of them. I just brought one out here. This is on Fort Dodge, and basically it's just like Carbine and Lance. It helps you understand the story surrounding the rifles at the time. U.S. uniforms, arms, and equipment. U.S. Army on the Western Frontier, 1890 to 1892. This is going to cover the later years of the Trapdoor. As you can see one right there in the cover. You got a Mills belt there. You got a saber. As I said before, we've put a lot of money into this series coming up, so we actually have a correct uniform for 1866. It's actually on its way. Still waiting for the quartermaster shop to send it to us, seeing as they're going out of business. But yeah, we have it ordered. It's supposed to be here. Frontier regulators, kind of more of the same, understanding what's going on. Buffalo Bill and the Last of the Great Scouts. This is important. Actually kind of goes with the Fort Dodge book, because he's the one that made the 1866 famous, and how he got his 1866 seems to be a mystery to some people, but I think we've kind of figured it out, and that'll be in the videos. But making the full-length 1866 rifle famous as a buffalo hunting gun. Over here we have the Wagon Box Fight, an episode of Red Cloud's War by Jerry Keenan. Important, once again, just to understand what's going on around it. This is the first fight where a trapdoor was technically used in battle against the natives, even though the Hayfield fight came the day before. But it kind of covers that too. Over here we have two very important books. This is the 58 and 50 caliber rifles and carbines of the Springfield Armory, 1865 to 72 by Holmesmere. And this is the follow-up book, More 4570 Springfields, 1873 through 1893, the uncommon, the scarce, and the rare. These two books cover everything, basically, besides the standard guns, the standard 73. They cover basically everything the Springfield Armory made from 1865 all the way through to basically the Krag. And so, you know, it's very, you have to have those two. Of all these books, if you have nothing else, you need to have the Red Bible, as they call it, by Frasca, book 1 and 2, and you need to have book 1 and 2 by Holmesmere. These are very important. Last but not least, we have this little Trapdoor Springfield in the service, and I would suggest you do not purchase this one. This one is full of lies and falsehoods. It was written a long time ago. The only reason I have it out here is because I want to kind of warn you against it, because nothing in it matches up with anything in any of the rest of these books. And the thing about Springfields is all these other books are from different perspectives, but basically all tell the exact same story. This one here goes off in the weeds places that, I mean, it doesn't even get a lot of dates right, so I would not suggest that one. And I almost forgot about this one. Indian War Cartridges, Pouches, Boxes, and Carbine Boots by Dorsey. This is a very interesting book, and when I first saw it, I knew I had to have it because, one thing, it's signed, but it's an older book, but you're going to see things like, look at this little one. This is an insert for the tin box for 58 caliber rimfire. So a lot of little interesting stuff like that in this book. Very good book. Suggest you get it if you're going to be into this and understand how these rifles were carried and loaded. So yes, these are the majority of the books I have right now covering the subject of trapdoors and Civil War rifles. And I actually have a few more coming. I have a National Park Service Guide 500-page book on Springfield Armory, and that should be a good one. There's a couple more. I have one called the Springfield Rifle from Little Bighorn to San Juan Hill. Haven't read it yet, of course, because it's not here. And there are also a couple books on Red Cloud's War that Duke has told me about that I haven't got yet. I will update when I get there. Now, just for the final what's going on with the series, we ordered a uniform for 1866 from the quartermaster shop because we want to do this correctly. Everything about this series is going to be as high quality as we can make it. I want it to blow the Colt series out of the water. And so what happened was we ordered that, and then the quartermaster shop stated that they were going out of business, which meant that we still get our order, but we are put on delay until September. And obviously I'm already doing the study. I have the script pretty well written for episode 1. It's going to be about an hour and 10 minutes long on the 1865 model. And all I'm really waiting for is we are in the process of building a new set for me to talk in, and all the shooting will be done by Ethan because A, he's in the military in real life, and B, he's right-handed, so he can actually make the steps of military loading and combat work. And so that's what's going on. We have spent a ton of money right now on this, upwards of $17,000 at this point, with all of our original props, all the original guns, all these books. There's a lot of money in books just right here. And so, you know, it's something we really, really want to do right. We wanted to start it in July, but we have not been able to. We have other things coming out already. Check out the history of the guns of the Revolution. Ethan just put up episode 1 on the Brown Bess a couple days ago. And we still have our Colt series running. We have our Smith & Wesson series running. The Smith & Wesson series is on hold until we get our cylinder back from Snapper. He's actually working on doing a little bit of work on a original third model, or I guess you call it Model 3 American, that we have, and it needed some work done on the cylinder, and he's working on that. When that gets back, we will continue on with the Smith & Wesson series. We will continue on with the Colt series kind of after I get this down, but as you can see, when you're doing study, I really can't. I tried to study both at the same time. Turns out I can only focus on one at a time. There's just only that much time in the day for me. And my brain only holds so much, and then it starts forgetting. So, like I said, this is the book series we're at right now on the Trapdoor. In November, we will be continuing with Guns of the Pilgrims. We're working on building the wheel lock right now from the rifle shop. A lot of fun things coming up. We hope this year will be our best year thus far. We intend to double our quality. We may cut down on our quantity just a little bit, but we intend to keep moving forward with everything else and try to get our quality up there. We want to be the absolute best that we can possibly be as far as YouTube history goes. We want the history to be right. We want the best camera quality we can possibly have, and we want the absolute best also in entertainment. So as always, guys, please remember to trust in God and keep your powder dry. Thanks for watching. Bye.